Welcome, everyone. This is Craig Rosenberg, known to a few or to some as the Funnelholic. And I am a student of sales and marketing. I like to talk about it. I like to write about it, but I also love to research it. And that's what got me really excited about working on the project that I am working on with Lattice Engines about what's a technology handbook for CMOs and VPs of marketing? And we want to, part of the project is to tackle a number of technology topics and to reach out to thought leaders to really understand kind of what they're seeing out there, what works and what doesn't work, and put that both onto paper and via video sessions like these and talk to folks and see what's happening out there. So. Interestingly enough, we had to talk about big data because it's a hot topic, and we tried to figure out other thought leaders, but Amanda and I both felt that the person that is most equipped to tell us about big data is Brian Kardon, who is the CMO of Lattice Engines. And what we decided is Brian's our guy. And so with that, Brian, I obviously have tons of respect for you, but I'm nervous that I will not be able to introduce you the way you might be able to introduce yourself. And so if you don't mind, I'd love for you to just spend a minute telling the audience about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. I'm Brian Kardon, and CMO of Lattice Engines, which is a big data for sales and marketing company. I've been a career CMO for about 20 years. Before Lattice Engines, I was CMO of Eloqua for about 4 years and helped grow it from about $15 million a year to about $100 million a year. And they've recently gone public and were acquired by Oracle. And then before that, I was Chief Marketing and Strategy Officer at Forrester Research, a NASDAQ-traded company. And so I spent a lot of time analyzing categories and talking about marketing technologies. And before that, I was Chief Marketing Officer of a very large company called Reed Elsevier. And so I spent a lot of time on marketing and technologies, and I'm happy to be here with you, Craig. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So for everyone in the audience, if you don't think Brian's a thought leader, whether he works at Lattice or not, now that you've had that intro, I think you understand why he's here today. But actually, Brian, if I might just kind of set the table, that there's really, we want to talk about big data, and we're having this conversation with the CMO and the VP of marketing. And we're, essentially we want to think about this like, dear CMO, VP of marketing, here's how you need to think about big data. But if we could start, I'm not even sure I understand what it is. And so if we could just kind of set the table with, what is big data?
Yeah, what's happened over the last few years is that the marketing organization is sitting on top of piles and piles of growing data. And it's coming from a couple different places. And I think if I get very specific, you'll understand. The first, obviously, is all of the web analytics we have, whether it's Google Analytics or Web Trends or Omniture. We're following all the clicks and the traffic and the visitors and the uniques. We're also sitting on top of our marketing automation platforms that are tracking our people watching things on our website, the emails that were sent, the open rates, the hard bounces, the unsubscribe rates. The third big piece of data that's now happening, of course, is social data. So we know how many tweets and how many followers and how many retweets. We know how many blog posts and how many people are following people on blog posts and how many comments they have and how many friends they have on Facebook. So it's social, it's all the email and marketing automation, it's the web analytics, and so many other things that are going on right now. So what started 20 years ago as maybe direct mail, where you have a database and you would mail things out, it's now become sort of hyper because everything is now digital, and because it's digital, you can measure it. And I think a lot of marketers are really struggling with what to do with the mounds of information. And I think a lot of them are actually paralyzed. So rather than use the information to advantage, they're kind of feeling like, oh my God, what do I do now with all this data? Is there something valuable here? What should they do with it?
Interesting. Okay. This is a side note. Do you know who coined the term big data? Because it's an amazingly powerful term.
I don't know. I should really know that. It's pretty amazing because of the simplicity of it all. And, of course, you read all these blog posts about what is big data. Is it small data? When is it getting bigger? When is it going to be giant data? So it's one of these sort of crazy categories. Is there going to be a magic quadrant about big data? So it's very funny.
I was hoping to match your smarts with some really, some incredibly worded questions, but really, this is, I'm not just an interviewer. I'm actually going to learn a lot from this session. And so for me, the simple question is, what does big data mean to the CMO and to the VP of marketing and to the marketing organization?
So it means a couple of things. The first is they really have an opportunity for a competitive advantage to beat the competition, to gain better insight into a couple things. The first of all, the first insight is customer retention. So you can find out what customers are staying customers and what customers are leaving, and you can do analysis to predict what customers will likely attrit. And so if you knew that Craig Rosenberg was going to, at some point, attrit, there might be certain things that you could do now to remediate, to make it better. And so we think that the first result from big data could be higher levels of renewal, customer retention, and customer satisfaction. So if there's certain patterns, so for example, if you haven't logged on in the last 30 days, or you haven't used a certain feature, or you haven't done a certain thing, so customer retention. I think the biggest part of big data, though, is really about new business. And most salespeople have thousands of accounts, and the biggest time waster for salespeople is not time doing administration things and in Salesforce or the CRM, whatever it is. It's actually time spent with the wrong customer. Yeah. So they're talking to a customer who's never going to buy. So if you could magically understand which of all your prospects is most likely to buy, that's where you would spend the time. And now with analytics, that is completely knowable. You can actually know by looking at all this big data which customers are most likely to buy and which customers you shouldn't call back again. We had one customer of ours at Lattice Engines. They were very proud of the fact that their salespeople were very persistent. They would continue to call and email prospects. And they talked about one kid who they called him the world's most persistent sales guy, and he would email 15, 20 times, call the prospect over and over again. But we show statistically that if they don't respond after the 6th touch, they're never going to buy. And so all that time from the 6th touch to the 50th touch is a waste of time. And so you can learn that from big data. From big data, you can learn, for example, that just because someone has a high lead score doesn't mean they're going to buy. So let's say the lead score is based on they downloaded a white paper, they watched a video, but in fact, big data could find out that the company's credit rating just went from AA to C. Or they used to have 200 jobs posted on their website, now they have 0. Or they just fired, an entire division. So there are lots of things you can learn about a company in real time that can tell you where you should focus and where you should not focus.
Okay, so big data, and the way you're thinking about it, is all the data that I could use to make better decisions. Because you mentioned stuff that I don't own. That's public external data. Is that?
Yeah, so the big data really comes in sort of 3 areas. The first area is some of the internal data that the company has, but very often marketing doesn't get to see. So that could be purchase histories, for example. What did this company buy before? When did they buy it? Internal data could also be the support desk. Is the company complaining? Did they pay on time? Did they pay full price? So it's all that internal data. Yep. The second piece, Craig, is external data. And that could be things that are in their SEC filings. It could be job changes that are going on. It could be things that are scraped off websites. And the third piece is social data. All of the likes and all of the connections you have in LinkedIn and all of the updates that people make to Facebook and LinkedIn and all the tweets that are happening. So those are the 3 big buckets of data that we're seeing. It's the internal data, the external, and then the social.
When I think about what you just said and I try to internalize it, I think, is this real? Like, is this really something that we can go do? And I hate to say that, but I wonder if you could talk about, is this happening today, or are we talking about the future?
No, it's absolutely happening today. I can give you some examples that may bring it home. So in the B2C world, there are all these very powerful recommendation engines, and you can think of 3 of them. You can think of Netflix, Pandora, and Amazon. And they're very, very good at recommending things to you because they know what you bought in the past. They actually know what your zip code is, so they know your economics. They know if you're going to pay full price or you want the discount. Retail sites all the time know what you looked at by your clicks. So NeimanMarcus.com knows that my wife put something in the shopping cart, but she didn't buy it. Thank God she didn't buy it. But the next time she goes, they'll feature that item. So that's an example of big data, looking at the click streams, looking at what people have bought before, and it's happening in real time. So you don't need analysts to do it anymore. You can write algorithms. Let me give you another example, and it's kind of like the Wall Street trading floor. 20 years ago, if I'm a trader, I would be looking at all these screens, and I'd be looking at what's going on with the futures price and the weather and what's happening with interest rates and what's happening over in Europe and everything. And I'd look at all this, and then I'd say, it sounds to me like I ought to make this kind of trade, and I do the trade. But what's happening now on Wall Street? They've hired all these quants. The people that are winning are people that are writing algorithms. They're sending out bots to look at all these data, billions of bits of data that are happening around the world. Those robots then analyze it according to the algorithms, and not only do they know what to do, they actually execute the trade. So the people that are really winning are not the guys on the pit, on the floor, yelling and screaming, buy, sell. It's these guys with PhDs in computer science or computer modeling or machine learning who are writing these amazing algorithms that crawl through all the data and do the trades. And a couple things matter. One is real-time matters. So a human being could never possibly process all this information in time. Small increments of time can make a huge difference. If you wait 20 or 30 seconds versus doing it immediately on a trading room floor. Same thing with marketing. If you offer up something right now, I think you know that classic MIT study that if someone's on your website right now and you call them, you have a 4x greater chance of selling them than if you wait till the next day. There's a huge decay rate. And so responding in real time really matters. And no salesperson can possibly know everything that's going on at the same time, but the algorithms can.
So just out of curiosity, just knowing VPs of sales, when you guys go tell them that, because essentially the big data folks and Lattice in particular can go to a VP of sales and say, what would you do if I told you I could tell you who your guys should go sell to, where you're the most likely to sell something? What's their reaction? I just have to know this.
They don't believe it. They don't believe it. And so what we often do is we say, listen, give us 1 quarter and give us 50 reps. So we'll put 50 reps on Lattice engines, and then the other reps won't be on it, and in a couple of months we'll compare the performance. And we've done this over and over again, and the comparison is extraordinary. So on average, let's say an opportunity to close is 5%. So the average close rate is 5%. But if you focus on just some accounts that are more likely to close, suddenly if you're focusing on the 40%ers instead of the 5%ers. So we see a couple of things happen when we've done these experiments. The first is that the win rate increases dramatically. Like 5 to 10x. And the second thing that happens that's a little more surprising is that the number of days in the cycle shrinks dramatically, because you don't have to convince them. This is someone who wants to buy from you, and it's mostly a matter of closing them. So deal cycle time shortens, and the win rate goes up.
And then what's the argument after that? I'm not sure what it is. How about marketers? Do you sense that today's CMO is, well, I guess you can't speak about everyone, but let me give you some scenarios. Are they all bought in and trying to automate their entire organization, or are they skeptical? Where are we today in the transformation of the mindset of the CMO as it relates to, in particular, big data?
I think sort of the first way that has happened is the adoption of marketing automation. So that was the first time really where marketers stood up and said, I really need to automate things, I have to measure things more accurately. And I think we're seeing very high adoption rates right now in marketing automation. And so what we're seeing, though, that what comes after marketing automation and what comes after that is predictive analytics and big data. So that's what we're seeing now. So leading companies that were leading with marketing automation 3, 4, 5 years ago are saying, what more can we do? And what they're doing now is predictive analytics, that they're using it to combine all the marketing automation data with CRM data, with social data, to be able to predict who's going to buy and what products you should try to sell them.
It's just amazing, right? If you think back to 10 years ago, right, just what you're saying would sound so far-fetched, but
Yeah.
We just know that we're getting closer and closer. All right,
So the real
so
question, Craig, is can you use data to predict consumer intent, what they intend to do? And the fact is, statistically, we know that we can. Now, we couldn't before. First, we weren't capturing the data. Two, we didn't have the math that was able to do it. And third, we didn't have the software that could do all this analysis in real time. Because we're not talking about an Excel spreadsheet here, some kid out of school doing pivot tables. We're talking about these mega databases that are able to crawl through websites and literally in milliseconds calculate what to do. So this was not physically possible even 5 years ago.
That's amazing. All right, so I'm bought in. I'm a CMO, VP of marketing. Now what? How do you recommend approaching big data? I mean, I'm not sure kind of where you want to take this, but I wonder if there's this first step of making sure, look, this is real. And now this second step is, okay, great. Now how do I plan for it? How do I mobilize my organization for it? How do I even consider what I need to go do? I've been on behalf of Lattice, I've been having conversations with marketers, and it's been interesting that, they're talking about how part of being a technology organization within a large enterprise, they do a lot of selling internally, right, and creating relationships with IT and these other things. So talk a little bit about that. When now I'm on in, I would like to understand and bring big data into my organization. What are the best practices? What are the steps? What's the strategy? Tell me more.
Yeah, it's a couple things. Usually the person on the marketing team who's most comfortable with this is going to be someone in marketing operations. So this is someone that is used to big data anyway. So usually the marketing operations person could be the point person. I recommend strongly, and as a best practice, to have the CMO pair up with the head of sales to talk about how can we use all these data to more accurately predict who's going to buy next. So the second practice, as I said, is really having the CMO and the head of sales, chief revenue officer, really team up, and find the right way to move forward. And the third is you just mentioned, Craig, and that is the CIO has a role in this. A lot of our clients are banks, financial institutions, and so you want to make sure there's good security going on. And also the third leg to this data stool is internal data. So it's not just scraping websites and social data. You don't need the CIO for that, but you do need the CIO for all your internal data. So it could be ERP data, it could be purchase history data, support desk data, all sorts of things that are inside the organization. Now, right now, no one at the company has all of those data in one place. They're all in different silos.
Yeah.
And what has to happen is they have to all be talking to each other and working together and need a platform to do that. And so you need the CIO to get involved to really help a company do that. You need the marketing person, the head of sales to really work together.
Yeah. Interesting. I mean, this is like we've had, if you were talking about the steps here, wave one was marketing automation. We were able to go to sales and say, hey, man, we're going to give you better leads. And now wave two, I get to go to sales and say, oh, and by the way, I can also, improve your close rates, your sales cycles by telling you, who to call and who to spend time on. That's pretty powerful in the relationship between marketing and sales. Is there what's on the CIO side? I mean, have you guys seen? I mean, I know that the CIOs, if you read everything on the internet, they're the ones talking about big data. I mean, there's a big movement across the rest of the organization on this. What about CMOs taking something like this to the CIO? Any recommendations on approach, or any recommendations on overall approach to the rest of the organization? Things like, well, hey, I want to go do this amazing effort, and here's why, and how to sell it internally. I get the sales guy. I'm wondering if you have any best practices or things you've seen with the CIO and even the CEO or anybody else that, for that matter, that would potentially get in the way.
Yeah, not too many things get in the way once you do a test. The results prove themselves. I found that the best partner for marketing and sales is actually the CFO. So the CFO has wields a lot of clout around the organization. So you go to them, you do a little test, you do a little model, and after a few months, the CFO says, wow, look at the improvement here. We've got to roll this across the whole company. So very often partnering up with the CFO is a very good strategy to get things done quickly. Chances are the CIO has already done some big data initiative. Now, it could be like global supply chain. So in real time, where are the trucks? Where are the suppliers? What's in China? What's in Japan? What's in Europe? So they may have already been doing some big data kinds of analyses or projects with logistics, supply chain, warehouses, depending on the product category. So they may have some familiarity with some of the issues. But like I said, the CFO is often a great audience to go to, and they'll be a huge advocate in getting it done.
Yeah, that's funny that you said that because I wrote that down because as you were talking, what it reminded me of was, in a number of conversations I've had with VPs of sales where they've told me, well, gosh, I had to sit down with the CFO who ran numbers without telling me and said, well, here's the guys that I'd rather use. Here are my most valuable, they typically say, here are my most valuable customers. So I can imagine, I'm glad you said that because I can imagine how powerful this must seem to a CFO and people that are really, they're revenue and metrics driven, and to be able to do something like this has got to make a ton of sense to them. So that's
one of the things that we've seen that the CFO really loves is, one of the problems with salespeople is how long it takes to onboard them. So it could be, a 6-month ramp, 9 months, could be a year until they're fully productive at 100% of quota. But when you're able to point them in the direction of the prospects that are most likely to buy, their ramp time almost doubles. So they're able to, ramp up in 3 months and 6 months. We call this the democratization of sales intelligence. The fact is, an experienced salesperson can kind of know which customers are going to close and which aren't, but a new sales rep really doesn't have a clue. But by looking at big data, you can actually know, and it democratizes this sort of excellence across the whole sales organization. So we found that big data doesn't necessarily help your top performers, your top 5%ers. They're always going to kill quota. They have a lot of experience. They know what they're doing. But it really brings up the bottom and the middle to much higher standards.
And if I might just have some fun, because you basically have told me everything that we can dream of doing, not everything, but that we've talked about today, we can do today. And as big data continues to progress, what does the future look like now that we have the ability to do the things that we have all, the
well, I think sales is going to follow a pattern that marketing did, that marketing was very bespoke and very custom made, 10, 15 years ago. And now, we upload data and we have landing pages and we can track everything. I think sales is definitely sort of the last bastion of art. It's about the relationship. You take someone out to lunch, you slap them on the back, you read their body language, you go to a meeting. I think increasingly that's going to go away, and we're starting to see that sales is moving from art to science. And the best-selling organizations, you look at who our clients are not small companies. We've got HP and we've got Adobe and we have Microsoft. We have SunTrust Bank, we have Staples, the office supply company, EMC. These companies could use anything, and they've all decided we want a competitive edge and we want to be using big data. So it's not the least sophisticated companies that are doing this. It's the ones that are the most sophisticated. They've already incorporated the competitive advantage marketing automation, and they're saying, what's next? How do we get the next advantage? And they're seeing this new wave of big data happen.
I feel like after talking to you, I should start writing and talking about big data, but everyone would, I don't know if I'm smart enough. It is amazing to see the future now. It's amazing, what we can go do.
Craig, I think what's happening with big data is that a lot of people are talking about the promise of big data, but there are right now not that many practical examples of it actually being applied to move the needle. There are things like Google symptoms, I'm sure you've heard of, that the CDC can't predict symptoms. They're always lagging because they talk to hospitals, but in fact people around the world go into Google and they type runny nose, runny eyes, this happening.
Right.
They can predict illnesses. And there's a few dozen other well-known examples, but most of it is a lot of arm waving about how big the data is, and it's frankly a bunch of BS. I think what we have to start writing about now are real practical examples of using big data in business. Good examples are supply chain and logistics. I was talking to a packaged goods company, and they do this in real time. They have thousands of trucks, dozens of distribution centers, and it used to be they would route the truck that was closest to the distribution center in the store. And I say, you don't do that anymore? No. We have RFID monitors on all our trucks, so we actually know how many pounds are in the truck and whether they have capacity to pick up. We don't have to call the truck driver and say, how full are you? We know. Number two, we know how many miles they're away. They also know is there a big hill or a mountain? Because that would consume more fuel. And they also know traffic patterns. So very often the truck that is closest to the distribution center is not the one you send. You want to send the one that in distance and in cost is the least expensive to send. So suddenly it's a real-time model, where the truck's located, what the traffic patterns are, what is the altitude of the mountains and everything in the way, how much capacity does the truck have. It's just all these variables in real time. No human being is looking at this data. The algorithms are looking at it and automatically routing all the different trucks. And we're starting to see similar patterns happen in sales, moving from sales to art to science.
And how does big data, so, we're talking about all this, forgive me for using an old term, but processing. And then how does it manifest itself? So a sales rep will see it. I mean, we're talking about it's progressed so much that a CRM system would support this type of visibility? Or?
Right. So the problem in some of the other efforts is you got a bunch of PhDs in a room doing algorithms. They come out of the room a month later, do this. But the salespeople say, that's not helpful to me. So the future of big data and what's starting to happen now is it's actually baked into the workflow of the salesperson. So the salesperson doesn't have to log in somewhere different. They're not overwhelmed with data. In fact, they don't see any of the data. They just see the results. So it's in CRM. For example, when Lattice is in the CRM, it's a plug-in to Salesforce or Microsoft Dynamics, and it reorders the accounts based on the probability of them closing this quarter. So in most CRMs, you can prioritize your accounts two ways, alphabetically, starting with aardvark, or you could do it by revenue size. Both are completely useless. We can order it based on the probability that they're going to close. So it's within the CRM. So we reorder it based on probability of closing. So start with the first one. And by the way, that will be reordered throughout the day. It's all refreshed based on data. The second thing we do within the CRM is we tell the rep, call this account, and here's what you ought to say on the phone. Oh, I understand you opened up a new office in Beijing and you're hiring lots of people. You bought some servers last month. You probably need 4 more servers to serve your growing needs because I see your web traffic is up by 40% in China. You know all these things already. So what to say on the phone. And the third thing that we're able to tell you is what products to sell. So it's 3 things. Who do you call? What do you say? And what products do you sell? And all that can be automated. But you still need a human being on the phone to make the call.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, believe me, some of the other interviews that I've done supporting our other content, they would tell you that as well, which is, the last mile belongs, with everything that's happening in the world, the last mile still belongs to a human. And we got to make sure that those people are trained and able to close. We haven't eliminated that yet. But, and as a matter of fact, for me, that's the most fun part is the last mile. When I'm involved in a sales process, to be able to expedite or at least just help me around the 75% of the other things that I have to do along the way that's a win for me in a big way. And clearly, as a sales manager, I can't imagine not using this. So any, as I was running this, I'm like, gosh, this is going so smoothly. I don't really have to extract anything out of you. This is like, I'm very excited about it personally. I think anybody listening to this would be very excited about it. We've talked a little bit about the fact that this isn't like BI 15 years ago where people were buying spending a lot of money and then spending the next 15 years figuring out how to use it. We've learned enough to say, no, just try it. We get it. Right. So there's really some best practices around implementation. And so the only other thing I would ask you on our way out is, what didn't I ask you? Like, what else does the market and particular marketers and we've crossed into sales? What do those folks need to know that I didn't extract out of you that you would just like to say to them about big data?
Well, it's interesting. I very often speak at schools about careers in marketing, and I've got a couple kids in college now, and they ask about careers. I think a big part is to make sure that you're part of a growing industry or something that's really booming. So, Craig, you could be the best newspaper man in the world, but, our kids aren't going to read newspapers, certainly not print. And so you want to make sure that you're part of a growing industry. When I got into marketing automation about 5 years ago, it was in the very early stages. No one was sure it was going to emerge, and then that grew like crazy. And so I think part of my success and Eloqua's and other people in the industry is that we really joined it at a really early stage, embryonic, and we watched huge growth. Yeah. And I think that's happening with big data right now. Big data is not a flash in the pan. It's not something that's going to last 6 or 8 months. It's really here for the next 10 years. And I would urge people who are very interested in hitching their wagon to a very fast-growing industry to really think hard about big data, what it means, and how this could be part of their career.
Terrific. All right. Well, I think that's a perfect ending to this session. I've been applauding along the way, and it's not because I'm just working with you. Truth be told, I spent this time really understanding what this all meant. So with that, I just want to say, Brian, thank you for coming on and giving us the data, no pun intended.
My pleasure. Anytime, Craig. Thank you.
So for everyone, again, this is part of a series of content that we're putting together, written and video, and we're going to create ebooks, we'll have blog posts, and we're trying to, help marketers, CMOs, VPs of marketing really understand how to build that modern technology platform. And that's why we've reached out to the thought leaders that we have, and it's been a lot of fun, and we're learning a lot, and that's why we had Brian on today to add that piece about big data. So thank you, everyone, for listening, and we look forward to our next session.